All right, Ray. So you won't believe it, but in the face of all of everything that we've been dealing with, we have more automakers that are increasing prices. We have Mitsubishi right here today, increasing by an average of 2.1%. So what I want to ask you is,
Yes.
so what do we know of right now? Which automakers have increased prices, and what details can you tell us about that?
Well, we know for a fact that Subaru has increased prices across the board. We know as of today that Mitsubishi's anything that gets invoiced today or later will be 2.1% higher. BMW has indicated a $2,500 price increase starting July 1st, I believe. We know Ford increased some prices in May. We know Audi increased the Q5 prices, blaming most of it on, well, it's a new model year and a new design. But prices at most brands seem to have been sneakily going up, and incentives to help move those products have suspiciously been going down.
Yeah, so what's curious to me, and it's funny, I'll pull up CNN. CNN's not usually the news source that I use. I also don't use Fox because I think both of them lean too far in their respective ways. That's a topic for a different day. Anyway, but I think
Yeah.
it's interesting that this is one of the headlines out of CNN. Despite 2 months of tariffs, car prices aren't going up. But what you just said is that obviously prices are going up, and that's what we're seeing from these new car manufacturers. But the reason I think it's very interesting is because don't you think an article out of CNN would be saying that, okay, prices are going to the moon because of all the tariffs that this guy is putting in place, right? So it seems weird to me unless this is actually a true thing where a lot of these manufacturers are trying to increase prices, but we're not seeing the average transaction price actually go up. And I don't know what data CNN is using to put this back, because what the news tells me and what you just told me is that prices are going up.
We can pretend. Let's pretend prices aren't going up, but they are. It doesn't take much to figure out that prices are going up. Average advertised prices are higher than they had been. Average transaction prices have gone up. We are rapidly approaching what I call the Rubicon, and it has nothing to do with Jeep, and that is crossing the $50,000 average transaction price barrier. There's only a few things that contribute to that. The increased price in the vehicles, because the manufacturers have increased costs to build those vehicles, and in many cases those costs are associated to the tariffs. So we can pretend that tariffs have no impact, or we can be honest about it and realize that ultimately, when there are tariffs and the cost of those goods goes up because of the tariffs, if not all of that cost, at least some of that cost will be passed on to the American consumer. And it's happening right now in automotive. And yeah, a lot of your automobile manufacturers are trying to say, well, it's because the new 2026 model. It's normal for the new model year to have price increases. Yeah, but it might not necessarily be normal to have the size of the price increases that we're seeing at some of the brands. I mean, Subaru went from the low end was a $750 price increase to a high end of $2,050 price increase. That's pretty damn significant. So I sometimes you don't need the news. You just need to go to the dealership and look at the window sticker.
And here's what I think is interesting that could be hitting a lot of these. The average transaction price is, even if some of these car makers aren't raising their prices on certain models, let's
Yeah.
say that are even models that are produced within the US, what we're seeing is that they could be cutting incentives, which would increase the average amount that you're paying for a new car. So
Yeah.
automakers could go out and say, look, we're not hitting. I think Toyota and Honda are a good example where they've come out and said they're not passing on any of these tariffs, the increases or whatever to their consumers at this point. But if they're pulling back on incentive spend, if they're pulling back the amount of incentives that they're giving to consumers, then they can do that without kind of saying it, right?
Well, sure. And then here's the other thing. What if they are deleting some standard content that had been in the vehicle at a certain MSRP? Okay, and then rather than raise the MSRP because of the cost of the tariff, you decontent some of the stuff in the vehicle to keep the MSRP the same while you're lowering your manufacturing costs. So any way you look at it, whether it is the amount of incentives being offered is less than it was before, or the content of the vehicle is less than it was before, or we're just going to be honest about it and we're going to tell you we're raising the price of the vehicle with the content that you expect because of price pressures, whatever they may be. Could be tariff related, might not be, but the prices are going up. And the truth of the matter is that prices today, in comparison to 10 years ago, are higher than what they were 10 years ago. And prices 10 years ago were higher than what they were 10 years before that. So, and I can assure you that prices 10 years from now will be higher than what they are today. That is normal. That always seems to be the case. There's always some type of price increases along the way. Sometimes they're larger than other times. Oftentimes there are extenuating circumstances that might create some of these price increases, but prices will continue to go up and vehicles will continue to be less and less affordable for the vast majority of people out there. It's not that hard to see. You don't wear glasses. I do. Can you see it without glasses? Because I know I can see it with my corrective lenses.
So yeah, I can absolutely see it. But I want to pull this chart up.
Okay.
Because I want to see, and actually I didn't realize it until I just pulled this up. But just to solidify what you're saying, this is from January of 2015. This is the wholesale value index coming from Manheim. Used vehicles, this is the numbers they report coming from their auctions. But you can see, even if we didn't, this is all the craziness. If you see my cursor here with COVID, right? But even before that, prices steadily go up, hit craziness, and now we're back to normalcy is what I think we're back to. And then you see the steady incline again. But what is interesting to me is this little tick up right here at the end, because this is something that I was not anticipating. And I wonder if some of the new car shenanigans are actually playing into this, where people are having to trade down a little bit more, because we're having more used inventory over the last couple months come into the system. I've seen more cars at auction because there's been this pull forward in demand, more trade-ins.
Yes.
And we saw a dip right after spring selling season that we traditionally see. But what I normally see in this market and what I've been predicting, and it looks like there's a potential that I could be wrong about this, just looking at it right now. I'll call myself out on it if I am. But I was anticipating that it will continue to go down during summer. But from this little Manheim blip I see at the end right here that I'm very aggravated about looking at right now.
I think it's just a blip.
You think so?
Yeah, looking at the Black Book data this week, we continued to have slightly larger amounts of depreciation than week over week than what we historically have seen. The things might have gone down 0.4 of a point as opposed to 0.3. So I think we had that 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 blip in March and the beginning of April over tariffs, where a lot of dealers thought that was going to impact used cars, and that there was suddenly going to be a shortage of used cars, and so they bid up the prices of used cars. And now what we're seeing is there's a correction, and the correction is greater than what we would historically expect to see week over week. So, yeah, I think we're headed back to what would be expected, what we would normally expect for this time of year. I know you're headed to one of the auctions after our chat today. I know Igor was at the auctions today, and he's reporting less dealers there, less activity. Sales are down, values are down. Dealerships are reporting new car dealerships much slower sales in June than what they saw in April and May. So I think that blip was just that, a blip. I think we are returning to what are normal times as far as what you expect pricing to be. I will say this: when you look at that chart, we are still significantly above what values were prior to COVID.
Which we should be, I believe. I believe this chart should, if you could draw a straight line, keep going, keep going, keep going. So I feel like we're actually not too far away of what maybe 10, 15% lower from here is where the chart would naturally end up. But what I'm hearing you say is that I could potentially still be right. Oh,
I think so. I think,
yeah. So summertime we get weak. That's what I'm experiencing that right now.
Yes. Summertime is we're in the time of year where people are typically what extra income they have goes towards family vacations and things along that nature. And then like the end of July, people realize, oh, school starts soon. So then we have back to school. Well, whatever disposable income people have, they're using it for back to school clothing, back to school supplies, whatever it is. They ain't using it to buy cars. So typically, summer is a slower time for car sales than many other times of the year. And we saw a huge pull forward in sales in April and May. And so April and May saw people who would normally buy in June and July buy in April and May. So June and July, I think, are going to be significantly slower than what would normally be. I received a text from Igor earlier today, and he said some of the dealers he's talking to, they're on pace to do like 100 cars this month, and they're typically 200 car a month dealerships. Now, I can tell you from 43 years of doing it, the second half of the month was typically much stronger than the first half of the month. So if a dealership did 30 cars in the first half, you'd expect to do 50 to 60 cars in the second half. So if a dealership that normally would do 200 cars, you'd think, okay, they're going to be somewhere around 75 cars at this point in the month, not 50. So I think June will turn out to be slower than what anybody had anticipated, which ultimately I would think should help continue to bring wholesale used car values down even more, I would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah, one thing I am worried about is that if new cars take a dump, like what we think is going to happen over the next 2 months, trade-ins at the auctions are going to go way down. Inventory is going to be constrained.
Yes.
And I would worry about value staying stubbornly high. We're going to have, hopefully, I mean, it sounds weird for me to hope for this, but I hope demand on the used car side absolutely takes a dump. because that means even if we do have a lot fewer used cars coming in the market, we're going to have fewer dealers that are going to go in and buy. So I can still buy stuff for cheap. And I can tell you from my dealership, I was pulling up actually my sales review my wife gave me earlier today.
Yeah.
It's now the 18th of the month. We've done 22 cars this month so far. So we're tracking probably somewhere between 35 to 40 cars for this month.
Yes.
And we want to be at 60. So that's how we're tracking right now for this. And we're a small used car dealer, but we sell stuff that's $5,000 and under. We hit a different market, but we can usually hit 50 to 60 cars, and we're going to be well under that.
I know that the reports that I got today is that there were not a lot of dealers, at least at this auction. So I think if sales are slow, you and I have discussed this before. Dealers tend to be reactionary. Okay, they're never proactive; they're reactive. And so, if suddenly they're seeing sales decline dramatically and a slowdown, they're going to say to themselves, "Yeah, I don't need to go to the auction. I don't need to be buying anything. We got more than enough right here, right now." So, if that's what we're experiencing, and there are some cars available at the auction and very few bidders, as you know, the fewer the bidders, the better the price ends up being for you when you're trying to buy something. If you have 10 dealers bidding on the same car, the ultimate winner is going to pay too much. But if you only have 2 of you bidding on cars, ultimately whoever gets it is probably paying well below what they would have.
Unless you get the 2 right guys on there, and then when that happens, then it's awful, because then we just try to run over each other, and then the price doesn't matter at that point.
Then it's all ego.
It's all ego at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you shouldn't put a price on ego. But so I don't know. I just we're at the 18th. There's 12 more days in the month. I think it's going to end up being a particularly slow month, both new and used wise. And I think that'll be a headline come the beginning of July as to how slow, new car sales were and used car sales were in June. And new used car inventory is holding pretty steady from what I've read. So.
Well, the amount that's on the ground is probably what you're referring to, but the amount coming into the auction directly correlates to new car sales.
Yes.
So that's my biggest concern. Let's go back in COVID, production down, fewer cars being sold, used car inventory went away.
You had a huge influx of used car availability in April and May. From all those pull-ahead sales in March and April.
And we're still feeling it right now because there's a lag time between when the new car is sold, between when the trade-in gets to auction.
Yes. So I would think there's still more than enough supply at the moment. That's not to say that it couldn't dry up quickly, because it very well could. But I think there's still enough supply in the system for the next couple of weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, perhaps, before you start seeing an impact if new car sales tank.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's weird how things happen, at least from what I see at auction, because I know you can look at these lines after the fact and see that there's a slow, gradual thing, but it doesn't feel that way at auction.
Yeah.
What it feels like is, okay, tax time's hot, prices are to the moon, I'm not buying anything because these dealers are paying way too much. And then all of a sudden, all the dealers at the auction just disappear. And it seems like there's just 1 week when it all happens at once, and then the sales fall off a cliff. And the reason why I know that is because I see all these no sales, and I see if bids go through the system. And it takes time for these selling dealers, the franchise dealers, to actually realize, okay, the market is going down now, we have to cut loose. That takes about 2 or 3 weeks after. That's what I saw last week, is that there was just tons of no sales. Put out an auction video saying, I mean, almost every car that I showed was a no sell.
Really?
And it's crazy to see that it all happens all at once. And then 2 weeks from that time, so I'm thinking next week or the week after that, all those dealers that were holding on to those cars are going to say, all right, it's moving, sell them all. And then that's when we traditionally see that big whoosh down. And it's like it all happens in 1 week.
Yeah.
No sales all 1 week, 2 weeks later. Okay, let's sell them all. And now everything's cheap. So that's what I would anticipate seeing on this Manheim chart that I typically see, is that you have this bump from tax time, which we saw that little bump right there.
Yes.
And also the pull forward in demand that you were talking about. And then we should see one of these kind of whooshes down, because I think right here was a tax time bump too. But on the other side of it, you'll always see this whoosh down. You got some more over here whoosh down. You got some whoosh down. A lot of these denote actual tax times going through the system, where we have this mini crash that happens after the fact. And the mini crash comes from sellers actually selling their freaking cars again.
Well, we will see what happens. I just have this sense that summer sales, at least at new car franchise dealers, are going to be well below last year and what the anticipation was that it would be for this year. I just think so many sales were pulled forward in April and May and the latter part of March, that we're going to see the impact of that starting this month and carrying through into July and August. And especially when you consider that July and August are not necessarily big sales months because of family vacations and back to school. So I think it's going to be much slower July, August, June, July, August than what anybody thought it would be at the beginning of the year. I think we pushed so much into the first half of the year that the second half of the year is going to look like an absolute collapse.
And just to show you exactly what we're experiencing out our lot. This is my wife. She just pulled the numbers. She says, reference point, you see the pull forward in demand, and then the slowdown also. We've only sold 22 this month, but we bought 47 this month. So there are more trade-ins for us to buy. But on the other side, once we buy them and get back to the lot, there's just there might not be any buyers
to buy them from you.
Yeah.
You've had the opportunity to build up your inventory at possibly a time when you don't really need to have your inventory built up because buyers are taking a break. That's why what you do is always so tough. I mean, people think that dealers just make a killing on every trade-in, on every car they buy. And, I used to always try to remind people, any trade-in or any car we buy off the street, it's a crapshoot. There is absolutely no guarantee that we will sell it. Now, we think based on prior experience with this type of vehicle and this type of model, we should be able to sell it. We expect to be able to sell it, but that doesn't mean we're going to be able to sell it. And so you invest your hard-earned cash into each and every one of these, and for them to sit there, that's not good for you. That's not good for anybody. These vehicles need to constantly be turning. The fact that you can buy them cheap at the moment, but you can't sell them just because you bought them cheap doesn't help you.
And what's very interesting how the used car and new car markets work is kind of the inverse of each other, because when the new car market is booming, it's actually really good for the used car market, because the velocity of money, it actually pushes when new cars are selling and selling quick. It actually can lower used car prices because it puts more supply. The only way I get cars is from a person going into a new Toyota dealership and trading in their old Toyota for a brand new one. That old Toyota then enters my system where I can go and buy it. And if there are tons of people buying tons of new cars, there are tons of trade-ins. And you would think, okay, supply and demand on just cars in general, it doesn't really work like that, because if you have more buyers in demand for new cars, well, then it can increase the supply on the used car side. And Matthew talks about that. Really, it's very weird how the supply and demand dynamics. You almost have to treat the used car market and the new car market as two completely separate markets.
Yes,
but they are so intertwined that they connect in so many different ways.
Yeah, they're interconnected. There's
what Matthew says.
Yeah,
A slowdown means less cars at auctions, thus less cars for him to sell his dealership. Very correct. And it can also mean higher used car prices. So even though demand is down on the new car side, that can lead to increased prices on the used car side. And it's very frustrating, especially for me over the last 5 years. It's been the most frustrating time to be a used car dealer that I've ever heard of.
What do you want to do in your next career?
Something else.
Well,
if it wasn't for YouTube, I would not be a used car dealer right now.
People have no concept, legitimately, of what it takes and how cash intensive it is. Not to toot your horn, but what it takes and how cash intensive it is for you to do what it is that you do. And every car you buy is a gamble. And sometimes the gamble pays off and you sell it quickly and you make your $1,000 or $1,500. And sometimes the gamble doesn't pay off and it sits. And, maybe eventually you sell it and you make $500 or $200 or you lose $500. But every one of those vehicles represents cash out of pocket. And so it's difficult at best to do what you do and make it work, especially when you're dealing with $5,000 and under cars. It is. People just don't it's not like if you had $100,000 to invest, would you be investing it in all these inexpensive used cars with the hope of selling them and turning a big profit, or would you find some other means of investing it that you would be almost more assured of getting a return? And for many people, it makes much more sense to invest it in something other than used car inventory.
Yeah, one thing I can say is we've made it a little bit less of a gamble over the years because we've gotten better at actually buying the cars. But keep in mind, Alex, he's my mechanic. He buys a lot of our cars. At the end of the day, we're still buying a car that's $2,000, $2,500. It's just like Ray said, it's a gamble. And I'm the one taking on the risk because we drive them, check them out after we buy them.
Yes.
And if they're not good enough to sell, I'm not reselling them. Even if you don't believe me as a used car dealer trying to do the best for my customer, I still have to get them inspected through my state. So there is even one level of check that we can't fake. We can't get around it. So there's a checking system, at least where I am in North Carolina. A lot of states don't have that, but here in North Carolina, it's very difficult to be a car dealer that sells cars for under $5,000 when I have to fix stuff that a lot of other car dealers in different states don't have to fix to actually sell them.
Yeah.
That hits my bottom line. What I want to say, I love our viewers. Check this out. I was asking for lines earlier on this chart.
Wow.
And somebody sent it to us very quick. I would give the credit, but I can't remember. My wife's going to put the name in the chat.
Okay.
Look at this. This is your ranges. So if we had the line dropping from the top end of the spectrum, we'd be right exactly where we are right now.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. But that's the top end of the range. What probably we need to be at is down here. And like I said, it was probably 10, 15, maybe 20% downside to be able to revert to the mean. And that would be fantastic if we could get down there. I'm not sure if we're going to with all of the stuff that's going on. We're going to need some kind of economic correction to get back to that, but it's not out of the cards. We can drop another 20% and the car market still not implode on itself.
I would think we would be okay with that, but yeah, there are so many uncertainties at the moment. Um, okay, thank you, Orange Rubber Ducky. That it is hard to God knows that you and I have been around trying to predict things for, I don't know, like the last 3 years or so, and you look at most of our predictions, and neither one of us is like particularly right or particularly wrong.
What are you talking about? I'm right about everything that I've ever said.
Yeah, well,
just ask my wife.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure she will straighten your ass out. But I was going to say that typically what has happened is that the outcome has always been somewhere in the middle between what I predicted and what you predicted, and so the predicting the future business has never been a good thing. Okay, nobody's really good at that. And I just have to say that today it seems even harder to try and predict the future than it normally would be. There are just so many variables at the moment that it is extremely difficult. I know you have an auction you have to get to.
Yeah.
And I saw a timestamp from your wife. So, if I may, for someone who's never wrong, that being you, your predictions are always right. My prediction is we have to sign off now.
Oh yeah. I gotta go buy a car.
Okay. I think you should do. What are you buying?
I'm trying to buy my niece a RAV4. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm going. Alex is going to be there buying our cars, and I'm trying to buy my niece a nicer car than what we traditionally buy.
Gotcha. Well, I wish you luck with that. Okay.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being the best audience on the internet. For me, for Ray, for my wife, for producer behind the scenes, we thank you. And I think I ended that one well. Usually I can't do it, but that
was, I think, your best ever.
Yep. All right.
It really was.
Thanks, guys.
See you, everybody. Thank you, Brad.